welcome.
Hello, Susan and dear amigos. It is such a pleasure to have you here in Lima, Peru, virtually. Today, we're going to have the chance of exploring the historic center of Lima and learning at the same time about one of the most interesting chapters of Peruvian history. And for sure, one of the untold chapters of the history of Lima. It has been a pleasure to be able to investigate for many years, but nowadays I'm going to be presenting to you all the history of the secret Jewish community of Lima. And this story is going to basically be focused in the periods of the 16th and 17th century, because we have documents from that time that were given to us to this to our modernity, thanks to historians, specialists, and also even the Inquisition. The Inquisition documented this chapter of the history and kept it secret also. So today we're going to unravel this history together, and especially we're going on the footsteps of one of the Jews of Lima. So today we're going to be able to be transported back in time to the colonial era together. I'm going to be using also our imagination to be transported to that time, because we don't have many evidences of this community, because this was a secret community. But no worries, because I will be presenting to you images that will help you to understand much better this story. So I hope you are ready to begin with me this adventure here in Lima, Peru. Thank you so much for being there, and let's start with this tour. So first of all, I would like to share with you our location and information about where we are in Peru. We are in this moment in Lima City. Lima City is a colonial city, of course, with some beautiful modern districts, but we are in this moment in one of the oldest sections of the colonial or viceroyal part of the city. We are just 2 blocks away, the main square of Lima, in front of one of the oldest churches of the city, in this moment in process of restoration. Also one of the most famous churches of Lima, the Church of the Franciscans Order, also known as the Church of the Catacombs of Lima. So today we're going to be able to visit different locations in Lima, different sites, and also we're going to be transported to an era that was very different, an era of many immigrants who came to Peru looking for opportunities, looking for a new start. And we have definitely to talk about this idea of new start for the Jewish community that came here completely in secret. And that is because it was very, very difficult for Jews to come to the Americas during the time when the monarchy of Spain ruled this location. So first of all, I would like to give you and share also, I have some images to share with you. So today we're going to be transported for moments to different eras of the city of Lima. So let me now show you this image. I hope you're able to see it correctly. Look at the Church of the Franciscans back in the 17th century. Right? So why is it important and relevant to mention this church during today's tour? Because this location where you can see in the image, there is a big market zone. The second oldest market of Lima was there, is one of the locations related with the character that today we're going to referring a lot in this tour. Now we're going to talk about Manuel Bautista Perez. Manuel Bautista Perez was a Portuguese Jew who came to Peru around the year 1620, and we're going to be on the footsteps of this character. And one of the things that I find very interesting about this man, who was, by the way, known as one of the wealthiest men of Lima, one of the most prolific, one of the most important, also supporter of the arts, supporter of churches, supporter of libraries. He was also owner of a big wealth. So what was the source of his wealth? Well, slave trading, and also he had an emporium related with clothes, fabrics and clothes. And this market that we can imagine also, it was located right here. Nowadays, we are in a process of restoration of the atrium of the Franciscan Church, was also not just the second oldest market of Lima, also was the oldest and the first slaves market of Lima. We have to understand, of course, the person, the character in the context when he lived. So slave trading was one of the activities that people used to do in the colonial times. Portuguese in particular, because they had access to territories in Africa, in the coast, the Atlantic coast of Africa, from where they trade slaves to America. Right. Also, the time when this man, Manuel Bautista Perez, came to Peru, because he was Portuguese. So how come a Portuguese came to Peru, a territory that was dominated and controlled by the Spanish monarchy? Well, because during that period, there was something called the Unión Ibérica, or Iberian Union. And that consisted in the union for a small period of time between the years 1580 and the year 1640 of the monarchies of Portugal and Spain. So during that time of the history of Peru, we received lots of Portuguese in this territory. And we're going now to have the chance of seeing one of the most important constructions we have in Lima, associated, connected with the story I am presenting to you all today. This beautiful house is nowadays a tribunal or a court. It belongs to the government in this moment, but we know it as one of the most important colonial houses of Lima, and also is the place where the oldest and first synagogue of Lima existed. So we don't have, of course, any elements, any symbols that associate physically this construction with a synagogue, but now I will tell you the history of the men who occupy this house. Manuel Bautista Perez, once again, was the person who lived in this house, and now I will be also sharing with you some few questions that will give you also an idea of the story of these men, and let's also have the chance of, first of all, understanding the name of this person, right? So Manuel Bautista Perez, known as the first rabbi of Lima, accused by the Inquisition of judaizante, which means someone who practices in secret Jewish faith, but of course, saying that was Catholic. So he was accused for being judaizante, crypto-Jew, right? Jew in secret. And this accusation was also terrible for him because not only he paid with his own life, also a big part of his family, right? So, and here you can see the house, also known as Casa Esquivel y Jaraba, which was built circa the year 1590. Okay, so we're going back to the image of the house. Look how similar the house has been kept. And this is the place where this man and his family moved when they first came to Lima. By the way, in a moment, I will also proceed with a round of questions. So no worries, we're going to have some rounds of questions during today's event. But first of all, would like to tell you a bit of the story of this man during his years in Lima. So remember that he arrived around the year 1620. He lived in Lima until he was killed by the Inquisition, and his family after that, the ones who were able to survive him, they disappeared from Lima. So we don't know what happened to them. Most likely they escaped from Lima because, you know, the shadow of the accusation of someone of the family being crypto-Jew was too heavy burden of that time, in that time. So The family came here and made a big fortune, as you know. The Inquisition persecuted Jews who were very rich, not the ones who were not wealthy, because the Inquisition made profits on the confiscations, on the elements, on the money, on the slaves, on the animals, on the properties they could confiscate. So an accusation, for example, to someone wealthier was more convenient for the Inquisition. But also there's another reason. And also as we can go a little bit closer, we can see just briefly how the inside of the construction is. Of course, we're not allowed to get in because this is a courthouse, but it gives you an idea also how beautiful and how big houses of this kind were inside, right? Especially for nowadays standards. Also, we know that there were people in the colonial times who accused their enemies, their business enemies of being Jew, most of the times to get rid from a competitor. So these type of accusations were much more common in a sphere of wealthy people, meaning that, to be honest, we don't know exactly how many Jews live in Lima in the period of Manuel Bautista Perez. When he was taken by the Inquisition and put in the torture chamber, and he spent years, by the way, in the Inquisition building, he finally accepted that he was the rabbi, or Capitan Grande, as in the Spanish slang of that time, the rabbis were called. So he died for that reason too. All of his wealth was confiscated. The house couldn't be confiscated because it didn't belong to him. He rented this beautiful house, which was, by the way, located right next to the Church of the Franciscans. Also, and he is pointed also as a benefactor of this church. So the accusation is not very clear who made it against him. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the documents, the complete documents from the Inquisition, but the file we have is about 13 pages in which is mentioned, for example, the different things he had, the wealth he possessed, right?
Vanessa,
So,
quick question.
yes, of course.
Why did the original Jews, including Perez, come over and establish itself in Lima? What were some of the primary challenges, in addition to the obvious, the Inquisition, but what were some of the challenges that they faced in those early years?
Oh, excellent question, Susan. And first of all, we need to go to the most evident, which we're going to continue also walking, and I will be sharing with you also another image, which will give us an idea of the first difficulty someone had to also go across when coming to Peru, which was the distance also. Peru is in the, let's say, in the understanding of the world in that period of time, right? The world was not very well understood back then. Peru was the most distant territory from Spain in the time of the 16th century, right? Later, it became the Philippines when it was conquered by the Spanish, but Peru's location was very distant. For example, no, between Spain to Peru, there is a distance of about 10,000 kilometers. It's a huge distance. By ship, for example, it took about 3 months to come from Spain to Peru. So if you were doing such a trip, you know, the first thing that you were putting in risk was your life because it was very dangerous. But also, one of the reasons to come to this distant territory was escaping. So you needed to escape from the Inquisition if you were Jew. You know that in Spain, in the year, let's say, 1480, the Inquisition was established. Later, the Inquisition was established in Portugal. So that's why initially the Spanish Portuguese escaped to Portugal. And then later when Portugal established an Inquisition, Portuguese also needed to escape from there. That's why many of them came to Peru. We had Jews who were coming to escape from the persecution and to start new lives. Back in that time, of course, the secrecy, the character of secrecy to come to this country was in the highest level. But also there was a lot of corruption. So meaning that you could pay, bribe to be able to get, for example, some free passes to go to certain places in the Americas. But it was not easy because the monarchs of Spain, which were Catholic, they wanted to eradicate any kind of parallel religion to the one of the Catholics, the one they were introducing, because they didn't want the indigenous to be confused with other faiths. And that meant that they put the eye on Protestants, they put the eye on Jews, on Arabs, or anyone who didn't practice their faith. So these are the reasons, of course, why people will come here. And also this was a rich land. So it took really, the risk was to be considered, but the benefits could be also big if you were able to live a life in secret, a secret life, as we know many people did, because Manuel Bautista Perez was captured, but many other people were able to live prolific life here in this country and were never discovered as Jews. And we are the children of them. So before I keep going with a little bit more information, I would like to double check with you, Susan, if there's any questions that we can maybe answer in this moment.
So there's not a question. I want to encourage people again to put questions in chat or to text message. We do have one text message actually from Julie, and she wants to know about the cultural blending. How is Jewish culture in Lima mixed and melded with the indigenous Peruvian and Spanish cultures? Are there any significance today for that mixture that we can see from way back?
Oh, what a lovely question. And I love to talk about the mixing of cultures, the mestizaje, as we call it in Spanish. Peruvians are mestizos. And in the old days, we refer exclusively to mestizos, to the people who were the children of Spanish and indigenous. But nowadays we use the word mestizo to refer to any kind of mixing. Peru, because has a capital located next to the ocean. By the way, probably many of you don't know that Lima is the only capital of South America that is next to the ocean, right? Nor they say Bogota, nor Quito, nor Buenos Aires. Lima is a port city. And that is why, as a port city, we had lots of influences. And that you can see whenever we walk here and there. The people who are here in the streets of Lima, we're, by the way, crossing the busiest avenue of Lima and one of the widest avenues of Lima to go to a very special place. But you can see everybody recalls or resembles a little bit of indigenous, but also could be African ancestry, could be also Asian, Chinese, Japanese, because we are a very, very rich and multicultural city. And why? Because we are a port city, Lima. Lima is way more multicultural than most of the other cities or the big cities in the country because of our status of port city, right? So I hope I was able to answer the question and you were able to hear me. By the way, it's a busy avenue.
We are. We see how busy it is. And of course, whenever you cross the street, I always get a little nervous because these are live tours, but I'm glad you were very safely put upon. But we do have another question. And actually, you mentioned the word and the words that are used. And I want to bring this up that Taibo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, asked. Taibo volunteers with people from this background who research genealogy. And there is a question with terminology. You use the word converso, you've used other words that too. Have you used or do you know of the word B'nai Anusim? B'nai Anusim. Have you heard that word? Because that is a word that some of the secret Jews have used, particularly the Sephardim.
Oh, very interesting. No, it is the first time I'm hearing about those words, but I would like also to do an investigation about that. The words used, for example, here in the slang of that time, referring to Jews were, for example, let's say marrano, which means Jew in secret. Nowadays, we prefer to use the words crypto Jew, right? And judaizante. Judaizante is someone that practices the faith, the Jewish faith. No? So these are the words that we were using more in the slang of that time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and thank you, Ari, for putting it in. It does say that it is more of a modern term, but that's very interesting. Teitel's also saying it means the children of the forced ones. And so, fine with crypto Jews. Marrano, of course, is not a good word that we use, but words matter, as we all know. And we also have another question from Ricardo Luitus. Was there a Portuguese school in Lima at that time?
A Portuguese school, I'm hearing right?
Yes, that's correct.
In the colonial times, there was no Portuguese schools or even no facilities specialized for Portuguese people. We know also that this alliance between Spain and Portugal lasted really, really few years, about 60 years. So, and then after, this relation was cut like sharp. No, we didn't have any Portuguese schools. And also the status of Portuguese was delicate in Peru because in the Americas, referring to Portuguese also was quite tricky. Most of the times, the slang of those days referred to Portuguese when they were in fact saying someone was Jew. So there was also certain level of fear for connecting with Portuguese, unless they were of proof condition that they were Cristiano Viejo, meaning old Christian. Cristiano Nuevo and Cristiano Viejo were sort of like separate castes. In the case of Cristiano Nuevo, the idea of Cristiano Nuevo was born at the end of the 14th century in Spain, when Jews were allowed to convert into Christianity, giving them the status of Cristiano Nuevo, but that status never changed, even though they had grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And also referring to that, we are here in front of the Inquisition. That's why we've been standing for long in front of this building. I wanted to give you the chance of seeing it also in its own facade. By the way, we're going to have another round of questions in some more minutes, but I would like also to refer to this building because it is very important for our story. So let's go now, after we've had a panoramic of the front, to the more closer location to have the chance of seeing the sign at the entrance. Okay, so the name of this building nowadays is Museum of the Congress and the Inquisition. So why we have these completely different names associated in one same building? Well, after the closing of the Inquisition building, the Congress, the new Congress that was just emerging after the declaration of the independence, appropriated of this building, used it as the Congress building. So that's why we have this museum with these two different exhibits. But the Museum of the Inquisition is nowadays closed because there is a restoration going on inside. So why we are coming to this location? So let me give you now another, let's say, sort of like a tour using our imagination in Lima. And let's also have the chance of sharing some images related with the Inquisition and how the Inquisition looks inside. Because of course, technology helped us to also access into buildings that we are not able really to see in person. So this picture I'm sharing with you is of the room called or named Chamber of the Secrets in the colonial times. And here, of course, we had some, let's say, events that were completely secret. The trials were secret. People were not really allowed to come in. We know that originally Manuel Bautista Perez was taken into the prisons, the dungeons inside this building. And here is where he tried initially to defend himself. Because he knew he would lose all of his fortune, all of his wealth. But later on, as the days passed, little by little, he started to accept his status as crypto Jew, right? Jew in secret, even saying that he was also the son of a Portuguese Jew. So he finally accepted that he respected Shabbat, for example, that he took care of certain foods because he learned that he shouldn't eat certain foods, for example, pork, right? So all of this at the end was enough for the Inquisition to push him to convert into the faith of the Catholics, something he finally decided not to do. This image is of the crypts, the dungeons inside the building, by the way. And by the way, I advise discretion with the next images that you're going to see. These images are related with the recreation of how these, let's say, well, the treatment to the people who were inside this Inquisition was, the tortures, right? So just very quick, we can have an idea of also how the museum is inside. And this museum is used for educational purposes. Children come inside the museum to understand about this terrible segment of the history of Peru. The Inquisition is something, of course, we would never want back, but it's important not to forget, because the minute we forget, the minute we make the same mistakes again, right? And here in this last image, I would like to share with you something very interesting, which is going also to transport us to the time when Manuel Bautista Perez finally was taken to be burned at the stake after 4 years of being taken prisoner in this building. We know that the arrest of Manuel Bautista Perez happened in the year 1635, and in 1639, finally, he was dressed up in this way, as you can see. This is the San Benito, is a sort of like a contraction of this word, which refers into English like holy robe, and was taken out in an auto de fe. So you can see here a recreation of how Jews were taken into these terrible processions to the main square of Lima, where the autos de fe took place, which were these multitudinary events when people who were accused of being Jew or Protestants or witches, right, were exposed in public. The idea was also to put pressure for them to convert and to repent. And those who didn't want to repent, didn't want to convert, were killed by the Inquisition in public. The killing of these people had to be exemplar, had to be sort of like a, pompous and a big ceremony, because they wanted to use these events as a way, of course, to make people retreat from their acts, the ones who were doing these actions in secret, right? So in this moment, we will continue with our walk, and we're going to the main square of Lima, following again the footsteps of Manuel Bautista Perez, and also the other 9 men who were taken to die into this ceremony of the auto de fe in the year 1639, in the Gran Auto de Fe. That's the way how it was called, because of the number of people who were killed at the same time, right? You can also see, just a quick interruption, this big group of children who are also coming to the historic center in front to learn about Peruvian history. This zone is very much visited by children, by adults, by national Peruvian visitors and international ones. So as we continue on this walk, I would like to also address maybe 1 or 2 questions from the audience in this moment. Is that possible, Susan?
It is possible. We want to encourage everyone to put their questions in, and I want to thank Tybal very much, as well as Brooke Cantor, because they are speaking about all of the different things with Converso and B'nai that I just learned, B'nai Anuzim. So that's very interesting. And I understand it's part of the World Union of Progressive Judaism in Latin America now, basically the reform movement of Latin America. So thank you to Brooke Cantor, who contributed that. So nowadays, I know we're going to continue with the story, Vanessa, of what happened and the tragedies that happened there for people who are looking to escape the Inquisition. So a sad irony. But nowadays, is there a Jewish community in Lima?
Yes, of course, Susan. There is a community, although the community is quite small in comparison to the communities of Chile, Brazil, and Argentina. Our community has around 3,000 people, members, which are mainly in the city of Lima, in the capital, because here in Lima, we have a Jewish school, Leon Pinelo School, for example. We have 3 synagogues. We have one Beit Chabad. We have some restaurants that offer kosher food, but the community is not really spread everywhere because of these limitations. So mainly Lima, Iquitos, Cusco, and well, those are the zones where nowadays we have the community. So most of the community that we have here in Lima in this moment are Ashkenazi Jews. So it means that there was not a continuation of this sort of like a same line of descendants from the colonial times we are referring to in this moment, because of the secrecy of the character of the Sephardi community that we had in the colonial times. This community didn't kept united. It spread over, and also it eventually mixed with the people of Lima. So we are, of course, part descendant of that community. So this other community, the nowadays community, are descendants of Ashkenazi Jews who came to Lima, the first groups around the year 1870, 1880. Also, it is understandable why we have that gap or that separation between those two immigrations. And that is because we became an independent country from Spain in the year 1821. So 1821 marks sort of like the end of the connections of Peru with the Spanish monarchy, with the Inquisition, with any kind of, sorry for the noise, any kind of authority from the church, as it used to have also the monarchy or impose the monarchy here. And we begin with a period in which we dictate our own decisions. And one of the things we needed the most was investors. We needed people to come to Peru to invest. Also in that time, there was a belief that, well, the best we could do was bring Europeans because they had technologies, they had the knowledge. And that's the time also when the Jewish community comes. We had also big wealth in the country related with the guano exploitation, the boom of the guano. Guano is a fertilizer that is made from the droppings or the excrement of seabirds. So Peru was very rich, and that's why many people came to Peru to do businesses. Initially, the community, the Ashkenazi community, was here in Lima, but then later they moved to other locations. Our community nowadays, the Jewish community of Lima, is not in downtown Lima where we are. It's mainly in the districts of San Isidro and Miraflores. And also, just a little interruption to my explanation. Look at this amazing balcony here. This balcony, which is huge, 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 gives you also an idea of the opulency of the architecture in the colonial times of Lima. This balcony is what we call Moorish influence. So it was not just Jewish influence in Peru and in Lima. We had also Arab influence. We had Moorish influence. We had also later African influence. We have all kinds of influences everywhere in the city. In the case of architectural influence, we had the Arab influence in Lima because many of the Spanish who came to Lima in the colonial times, in the early viceroyal times, were from territories who were occupied by Arabs. And those lands had also the footprint, the mark of the tiles, for example, the wooden balconies, the idea of secrecy related with these very introverted houses, which later were, of course, transformed, but they are still here in Lima as part of that heritage.
Wonderful.
So,
and Vanessa,
before,
could you tell us also what street are we walking down? And if you could tell us the streets, some of us may recall, certainly me from 2 days ago, I don't have that short a memory, but if you could tell us the streets we're walking down that illustrate so many of these amazing buildings.
Of course, I will. This is Junín Avenue, Junín Street, one of the most important streets in the historic center of Lima. And that is because it connects the old Inquisition, the Congress building, with the main square of Lima. So we're going to continue walking this street, Junín, until we reach the main square of Lima. But our intention of walking this street is in a way also revive these last hours, the last hours of life of the man who, with his story, has helped us to understand the difficulties of being Jew in Peru, in the Hispanic Americas, Manuel Bautista Perez. Also today, I would like to mention the story of one more person that was also trapped by the Inquisition. That's going to be at the main square, but we're mainly following the footsteps of this gentleman. And maybe you remember that I showed an image of a person in San Benito in the Holy Rope, right? And this, let's say, this passage, this terrible procession that took place every time there was a auto de fe. Auto de fe, translated into English, would be act of faith, so in which people proven their faith, and they could even be forgiven by the church, were the ceremonies in which people were taken into this procession for everybody to see them, everybody to find who was guilty of being Jew or could be Protestant or any other, let's say, religion that was forbidden in that time. So my last words will be related with the Inquisition, about the beginning and the end of the Inquisition, right? Because we're now talking about the Inquisition. So the Inquisition existed in Peru for 250 years. 250 years of Inquisition. And the Inquisition also has different roles in the history of Peru. So initially, the Inquisition was established in the year 1569, at the same time in Mexico and in Peru. By the way, the Hispanic Americas only had 3 Inquisitions, which were very little, right? But they were just 3, right? For such a big territory. So the Inquisition of Lima started to function in the year 1570. And initially, there was a persecution of Spanish who were not behaving accordingly to, let's say, the way how the church considered they should behave. For example, there were many bigamous, there were many blasphemous, there were many people who were not practicing the faith the way they should, right? So the Inquisition was an arm, a religious arm of the monarchy of Spain. It was not run by the Vatican, but it was run with the help of Franciscans, Dominicans, Jesuits. So this group initially controlled the Spanish. Later, they realized there were Jews and Protestants here. By the way, the first person killed by the Inquisition was a Protestant. Well, this man was burned in the main square of Lima. So in these 250 years, how many people were killed by the Inquisition in public acts called actos or autos de fe, or acts of faith? Well, the answer might surprise you, because in 250 years, the church and the Inquisition documents also accepted that only 32 people were killed in autos de fe. And by the way, this is completely easy to be contrasted with documents of viewers who were present in the autos de fe. So indeed, we had, of course, in public acts of faith, 32 persons killed, from which 23 were Jews. Only 23. Of course, every life matters. But if you compare to the enormous amount of people who were killed in Spain or in Portugal by the Inquisition, indeed, this is a very, very tiny figure, very tiny number. So, but there is always a but. And the but is that, what about the people who were killed in the dungeons? What about the people who were killed in tortures? We don't have that information. So the information is not complete, right? So the Inquisition ended in the previous year before the Declaration of the Independence in 1820, and it ended as an institution that burned books. Not anymore people, they dedicated to burn books dedicated to the independence. So here we are at the main square of Lima, amigos. The main square of Lima is surrounded by beautiful buildings. And also would like to now share one more picture that I think you'll find very, very interesting, because it will take us again back in time to the autos de fe. So this image you are seeing here is the main square of Lima, with, of course, a different look. We're going also to find where the buildings there are. Look at the fountain in the center of the plaza, one side of the picture. But also we can see a group of people walking into the main square, like sort of like in a big procession, escorted with horses, right? We can even see people wearing the San Benito with the conic shaped hats, right? Very pointy. And look, something very peculiar. I will do a zoom into one corner of the image. Can you see the wooden balcony over there? Okay, amigos, prepare to see how it looks nowadays. So this is the exact same balcony. This is the exact same house. And we are in the place where the procession entered into the main square of Lima. We can also see here a lady in veil, the tapada limeña, the veiled women of Lima, receiving us into the main square of Lima, the fashion of the Limanian women, inspired by the Moorish influence. So we can see the square very lively today because, well, giving you this information, if you like football, soccer, as you call it, today, Peru is going to play against Paraguay. And in days like this one, because we love football, everybody's coming to the main square of Lima to see the game here in a big screen. So this is something very, very special that we usually cannot see in other occasions. So we're going now to get a little bit closer to the square, and the fountain also looks very, very pretty. And before we go to the center of the square for a grand finale of our tour, I would like also to mention a couple of things. We have some important buildings, of course, around, but let's start with this one here. This is the Cathedral of Lima. And today we were talking about the importance of Catholic faith in Peru. And in Peru, we have about 80% of the population practicing Catholic religion or feeling identified with Catholic religion. And the Jewish community is one of the minorities we have here in Peru. But Benjamin Netanyahu, he historian, he believed that in the Americas, there were about 60 million Sephardic descent. So he believed that even here in Peru, although many Peruvians don't know it, we are descendants of Jews. We know that the Jews, in a way to survive, they also went to other parts of the country. One of the places where most of them went was Cajamarca in the north of Peru. And there is where we have a large population, a huge population of descendants of Jews. So we have a reminder of the Jewish presence in Peru hidden here in a secret corner in the historic center of Lima. And you cannot leave from this tour without seeing this little reminder of the Jewish presence. So as we go and get closer, and you're going to practice also your Spanish first because the sign is in Spanish, I will also ask Susan to prepare one more question maybe from the audience. Also at the end, we will have another one at the very end of the event. So look at this. You can read the sign with me, and it says, Calle de los Judíos, a street of the Jews. There are two reasons for this name being named after the Jewish community. Number one is because in the times of the second wave of immigration, the Ashkenazi community that came mainly from Poland, from Russia, we had here a section right next to the cathedral where most of the houses of, ateliers of fashion, places where you could acquire also fabrics was located. So most of the people who work in that industry in this street were Ashkenazi Jews. But also there is another interpretation, a little bit more tragic. And this one I was able to research also in old colonial documents, which says that next to the cathedral, back in the colonial times, when the auto de fe used to take place in the main square of Lima, the days previous to the auto de fe, next to the cathedral, a big sign or like a board of wood was displayed with names of the people who were accused of being crypto Jews or let's say witches or Protestants. So the names of them were displayed next to the cathedral in this corridor. And that's why this street ended up being called by the locals Calle de los Judíos, a street of the Jews, where the names of the Jews were discovered. In the memory of the people of Lima, this street continues also in a way reviving also this presence, which was secret. But well, today we are being able to understand and to decode certain elements and also pay the due respect to these characters. Finally, the last person who was killed by an auto de fe was a woman. And the name of this lady was La Bella Toledana, Ana del Castro, La Bella Toledana, the beautiful woman of Toledo. This lady was the last person killed by the Inquisition. And from the 23 Jews killed by the Inquisition in 250 years, she was the only woman. Also, again, a wealthy lady, which seems, according to the investigations done by specialists, was accused of Jew by a lover, right? So he was very angry because she replaced him. So this lady finally accepted. She respected Shabbat. She lit up candles on Friday. She avoided to eat pork, but she said that it was because she learned to do it from her parents. So she didn't know any other way. And that's why she was finally killed by the Inquisition here. So before we wrap up with this tour, I would like also to tell you the names of the buildings around, because we cannot be in the main square of Lima without knowing the buildings name. The beautiful construction you see in front is the house of the president of Peru. Nowadays, a woman for the first time in our history. This construction is from the year 1938. We have the fountain we saw in the painting I show you. It's a fountain from the year 1651. The City Hall of Lima, of course, from 1944. So partially new buildings, but as well we have, of course, some very old historic buildings here accompanying us during this tour. Susan, is there any other question?
Well, I have some comments, and I know you've had to battle over the sound system in the square, so congrats to that. But I also want to just bring up a couple things that Ari also put in the chat. For those of you who may not have seen it, the Jewish politician Pedro Pablo Kuczynski was sworn in as the president of Peru during the first week of August 2016. So Peru actually had a prime minister who was Jewish, which is incredible, president. And then the prime minister of Peru also, he held that position from 2005 to 2006. So very interesting, this merging of cultures. And I do want to ask one other question. By the way, many people have mentioned how smooth the tour is because of your masterful way of using the gimbal. I assure you, Vanessa's on her own, and she's doing all of this using the camera and back and forth on her own, which is incredible. I know how difficult it is. But I do have a question. So you mentioned about the Jews nowadays, and most of them are Ashkenazim. Is there anti-Semitism there, or is it a very is it a community that really meshes with all the other cultures, especially since 80% are practicing Catholic?
Thank you so much for that question. And well, I was also looking forward to mention that Peru is known as a very friendly country with any foreigners, with any different cultures, different traditions. And that is because also Peru lives from tourism. So tourism has been also a great opportunity for us being or finding as a primary source tourism to understand different cultures, respect different cultures. But Peruvians are naturally very, very friendly. So in Peru, there is not anti-Semitism if you compare it to, for example, unfortunately, countries that are quite close in the same, say, region. For example, in Argentina, I hear there has been more presence of anti-Semitism, Brazil as well, but Peru has not let's say, anti-Semitic demonstration, has never had it. Of course, there are some individuals that sometimes have mentioned things, but are not considerate by Peruvians, as you know already, and thank you so much for posting to our fellow viewer. We have politicians that are Jew. We had people in the media, in the television who are Jew. So although they are such a small community, they are highly valued by us. So I can say for sure that Peruvians are very, very friendly to Jews and to any other person with any other religion that wants to come work in this country, stay in this country. We receive them with open arms.
And I'm going to share something a little bit that you shared with me, Vanessa. You did a little DNA hunting yourself of your own heritage. Maybe you'll share that with our group here because I found that fascinating.
I'm so happy that I still have some minutes to share that with you all. And it was pretty much like the surprise that I received from life after doing years of investigation to create this tour. So in the recent times, about a couple of years ago, I was able to find the investigations of Mr. Nathan Watchell, which is a man who is specialized, a historian who is specialized in Jewish history of South America, especially Brazil and Peru. So to make a long story short, I was able to find, thanks to him, that there is a theory that he presented that the people, the Sephardi community that was here in Lima, sort of like trapped between, the Inquisition, the persecution, the ideological persecution, they escaped from Lima and they went to the north of Peru. Intentionally, the intention was going to Brazil through Marañón River, because that river ends up in the Amazon. But at some point, this community decided to stay in Peru in a zone called Cajamarca. And Cajamarca is the place where my family comes from. In that location, it is fascinating. People still keep certain traditions that are very unique. For example, when someone comes inside a house, they first knock the right side of the frame of the door, and then after they knock or touch there, and then knock the door to come in. So probably sort of like a memory from the mezuzah that also they carry with them when they establish that community. Something important also is that in that community, the Moises are called Moshe, for example, is the only place in Peru where everybody is called Moshe there, and like that, no? So these are elements that are still alive there, and my grandfather is from there. So my Vasquez line, and Vasquez, by the way, is known as a Sephardic last name. My Vasquez line comes from Cajamarca. So there is a big chance I am also a descendant of Sephardic Jews, which makes me very, very happy as well.
Well, I'm so glad you shared that with us. We were delighted to be there in person with you. As you know, we have been on so many of these tours with you, and so I'm glad that you shared this with us today. So Ari, is there anything else you'd like to do before we say, sadly, goodbye to Vanessa on the trip? I hope your community enjoyed this. It is always interesting. You never know what's going to happen on live tours. So we are competing with the football, but it is really just so much, just a wealth of knowledge, Vanessa.
Yeah, I just want to thank Vanessa. I just want to thank Vanessa for taking us on a tour from our homes to the streets of Lima, Peru, and I want to thank Susan for organizing this for us. Thank you. It was terrific to be in person and learn a history of a place that most of us don't know and never been to. But Susan, since you were there, maybe we'll share with people who want to go traveling how to actually reach, how to go to Peru, how to go to Lima, see things, and maybe connect with Vanessa if they want to do some tours in person as well. We'll do that in the follow-up.
To do that, absolutely. We'll also, Catherine will drop my email in the chat as well. You can do that. We'll connect you directly with Vanessa. I was fortunate enough to go not only to Lima, but to Cusco and Pisco. By the way, there are 3 Chabad synagogues that I've discovered throughout Peru, Cusco, Pisco, and Lima. And surprisingly, in Iquitos, the largest city in the world that you can only get to by plane or by boat, 500,000 people, there was a huge Jewish community because of the rubber industry in the 1890s, and there are still 3 synagogues there today. I know that because we passed it. I turned to my husband, Moshe, and said, there's a synagogue here. So it is surprising. You'd be surprised where Jewish heritage, Jewish history, and the Jews of today, contemporary, live all over the world. Fascinating, and we love to bring it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this adventure. There'll be a follow-up email with a great handout that Wowzitude put together with some reading and maps. Thank you, Vanessa. Look forward to seeing you in person on the streets of Lima one day.
She's
Thank
amazing.
you, everybody. Thank you,
Take care.
guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Be safe out there.